It is an agenda-setting week for 2022, and the World Economic Forum says it is a time for talentism, with companies aiming to recruit young talent by meeting their standards for ethics, governance, and action on climate. You're listening to the Business Extra podcast coming from the National in Abu Dhabi. I'm Mustafa Al-Rawi, Assistant Editor-in-Chief. If you like this show, please do subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your audio content. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's a big week for meetings. In particular, the World Economic Forum holds its Davos agenda. This is the online gathering replacing the in-person meeting that was to be in Davos, the Swiss resort. It's been postponed for the reasons of Omicron. Hopefully, it'll be an in-person meeting in the spring or summer, the forum says. But I managed to catch up with the forum's president, Borge Brende, to talk about what this week will be about. And he came up with a very interesting point about talentism, which is something the forum has discussed, which is about companies, employers looking to recruit young talent and how young talent's expectations for a number of important issues, whether it's action on climate, or ethics or governance, corruption, other things must be met for them to choose to work for the employer. So this is something that will define the decade, according to Mr. Brende. So let's listen to that interview now.
It's a pivotal week for setting the agenda, if you like, for 2022. So, I want to talk about a little bit about the practicalities of hosting this event, but maybe we can start with what you think are some of the key issues that are going to be discussed over the next few days.
So with the cost we have with several heads of states and governments, also some of the key economic players in the world, I strongly believe that the geopolitical situation and the polarization we're faced with will be one topic. I think also another one that will be incredibly important is how do we know sustain inclusive economic growth, because we're not out of the woods yet when it comes to the pandemic. And we are also seeing increasing debt. We're also seeing increasing inflation and also supply chain challenges. And maybe thirdly, this decoupling of economic growth and climate challenges and the CO2 emissions.
Well, the World Economic Forum has been introducing a number of ideas. Truthfully, they're evolutions of concepts that, for example, your founder, Professor Klaus Schwab, has been working on for decades. But the idea of there being, a lot of disruption because of the pandemic, that this is both obviously a risk, but an opportunity, that, real stakeholder capitalism, there's a chance to reorganize globalization, essentially, to achieve those aims. This week, do you expect that to take on its natural extension from conversations in the last 18 months?
Indeed. And we also will, during this Davos agenda, discuss stakeholder capitalism. We'll also discuss the so-called ESGs, these environmental, social, and governance standards that more and more companies are now implementing. And I think we have seen during this pandemic that if you really want to get something done, you also have to make it into public-private partnerships. Look at the vaccines that we developed in less than a year. And this had not been possible without this unique cooperation between governments and all the pharmaceuticals and the private sector. We know from the past that developing vaccines can take more than a decade. And here we have many vaccines that are effective against also COVID-19.
For those who may be not that familiar with the forum, or maybe you've just heard Davos, it's a meeting in the Alps in Switzerland. But the fact is that there's a track record of bringing together the private and the public sector very effectively. And I think people have maybe seen, because you mentioned the vaccines, Borge, people have seen real cooperation on that front. Perhaps not full efficiency, not full equality of access, but certainly I don't think any of us would have anticipated the kind of level of success we've had. But the World Economic Forum has kind of been doing that for years. For example, the Gavi alliance is kind of the brainchild of the World Economic Forum, wasn't it?
No, thank you for mentioning this, and it's so true. The World Economic Forum in 2015 became the international organization, also formally, for public-private partnerships. So this has been in our DNA since the 70s, that we will have to also mobilize the private sector if we want something really done. And one of the good examples of this is, of course, the whole vaccination initiative that was launched in Davos many years ago, Gavi, that has inoculated millions of children around the world, the Global Fund, but also CEPI, this new institution that was initiated a few years ago, that are set up to really develop new vaccines as a response to new diseases or with pandemics. That was a result of the Ebola crisis that we saw, and we got even vaccines against Ebola.
And I think when Professor Schwab was in Dubai last year, I was listening to him. He was briefing some of us about what the plans were. This is before Davos was changed to an online event at this time, and he was very keen to highlight the track record of achievements, of action, such as what you've been describing. And to a certain extent, there are people from a distance who might say, oh, all the forum does is it just gathers people to talk and nothing gets done. But he was really on message with that, to say this wasn't the case, and that in 2022 he expected sort of big accomplishments. And I wonder, having to start the year in an online format, does that change the ambition? Does it change the scale of the ambition?
Our ambition is clearly there. And as you mentioned, Professor Schwab has, during decades, been an advocate for companies taking more than their responsibility towards their shareholders. It's a responsibility towards the employee, but also society at large. No company can, in the 21st century, just operate with a narrow mind. It's also the decade of talentism. How to recruit young and talented people if you're not complying to the highest standards when it comes to social standards, when it comes to the environment, anti-corruption work, and all this. So what I see now is that for the Davos Agenda Week that is happening this week, it is really a lot of curtain raisers also towards our physical meeting that hopefully will happen in late spring, early summer in Davos. But what we have seen is that we have been walking the talk also in the run-up to this Davos Agenda Week. And to make it maybe less abstract and more concrete, what we did at Glasgow at the COP26, the World Economic Forum initiated, together with the State Department and the Secretary Kerry, this big new initiative among the leading companies of the world, the big purchasers of the world, like the Amazons, Apples of the world. And we initiated this First Movers Coalition. That's a coalition where the purchasers commit to then green their supplies line. And it also implies that when they buy from their suppliers, they will say that you have to reduce the CO2 and greenhouse gas footprint of your production if you're going to continue to buy what you're producing. And this was a big success. We're continuing this discussion with Secretary Kerry, with Bill Gates, and also with key other players this week. So these are some of the examples of how we want to really push the envelope.
What do you think is the secret sauce behind persuading these huge companies and their leaders to kind of push ahead with these initiatives, when I think it's fair to say that governments have struggled to convince these businesses to take the same steps, yet here we have them saying they'll do it? I mean, is it a matter of persuasion, or is it the environment in which these discussions happen?
I think many CEOs also feel very committed to combine making a profitable business with putting gender equality, putting anti-corruption work, putting biodiversity, climate, and more inclusive growth, putting skills at the top of the agenda. I think that's a way of also showing that business takes a broader responsibility. But what our reports have shown also during the last decades is those companies that are good at also implementing and using new technology, for example, in the best interest of humankind, are also more profitable companies. That's coming back to my point about talentism. A company is not doing better than the talent a company can recruit. And we have seen that the most brilliant people would like, of course, to work with those companies where you also pay back to society. Everyone would like to use their knowledge and competence for improving the state of the world. And so it's good for business, but it's then also good for the planet. So it's a win-win situation.
So I guess it's a matter of showing where their interest lies, and their interest lies in this direction. But I wonder also if it's, given that the forum itself doesn't come across as, adversarial in any way. I mean, you're not trying to get taxes out of them. There's not that kind of zero sum game going on, that you can have conversations that could actually be more productive. It's rarely in the gaze of the public spotlight, correct?
That's true. And I think one of the strengths of the forum is also that we're a neutral and impartial platform. There is enough confrontations in the world. And we believe that even in a world where we see big powers are struggling, cooperating, we see challenges in the heart of Europe. We also see challenges in Asia and between the G2, China and the US. There are areas where there's still great possibilities for cooperation. So we would like to look at it as not as a glass half empty, but as a glass half full. And we saw it also at COP26 in Glasgow, where in the last moment of the conference, Secretary Kerry sat down with special climate envoy Minister Xie from China, and they agreed on the text. And we have been moving forward. Before Paris, we were on the track for a 4 degrees increase of our planet. After Paris, we were on track for 3 degrees. After Glasgow, we are on track of 2 degrees, and still 1.5 degrees Celsius is still an option if we get things together. So that's what we are all about, trying to get also companies, civil society, and governments together and collaborate and find, even in this polarized world, areas where we can collaborate, because global challenges need global answers and response.
And it needs agility, and it needs the ability to be flexible, to move with events and how things are going. And very much the pandemic has taught us that we can't take anything for granted. And I wonder specifically about the forum. Maybe we can conclude on this point. It's going to be the second year in a row in which the annual meeting is not being held in the town of Davos. It's going to be online. Hopefully you'll have a proper in-person meeting in the summer. But what's that like for your organization? You had hoped until recently that you could go ahead with your in-person meeting. How do you deal with that? How do you move forward and make it into an opportunity, if you like, and not a challenge, if you excuse the cliche?
So we were disappointed for a couple of days, and then we just decided to roll up our sleeves, and we put on this Davos agenda week with more than 2,000 participants, 30 sessions, 12 special addresses by head of states and governments, international organizations. We'll have President Xi from China. We will have President also from Indonesia. We'll have Secretary General of the UN. And I'm very also excited that we are able to have the two first global messages from the new Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz and Prime Minister Kishida from Japan. And we should not forget that these are the third and fourth largest economies in the world. So we decided that we were going to put the week on, and we decided that we're going to try to also have a physical Davos late spring, early summer. But what we have seen during these 2 years, when we have had to run also the World Economic Forum more as digital events and digital meetings, is that we have got more partners than before, and we've got a lot of things done also in that context. But of course, as everyone else, we do hope that we are now seeing the beginning of the end of this pandemic, that COVID is going from a pandemic to be more endemic. And then we, of course, will resume also with more physical elements and meetings in the future. But I'm sure that we will never go back to only physical. I think also this COVID has shown us that a lot of things can also be done very effectively in a digital way.
Borge Brende, thank you so much, and best of luck for this week.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today. All that remains to thank our production team, Arthur Edison and Aisha Khan. Please do join us again next time.